What's up, all? This is Potenkon. I'm in the Guild Zombie land here to show you the build that I prefer to use while I'm in a Zerg vs. Zerg situation. This is a straight up World v World build. It can work in PvE, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Right now, I'm just going to talk about what it is this build does in World v World. So let's go ahead, let's jump into it. Let's go ahead and hit up the traits. So the trait setup that I'm using is 10, 0, 20, 20, 20. Now in strength, what I use is I use Death from Above. It's a great initiating skill, which is what this build does. Now the great thing for this is if you have your Zerg up on a cliff, you take all your warriors, you jump down, you hit the attacking Zerg, and it'll splash them all out. It does a nice little knockback. And of course the 50% less damage, also great, especially if your Zerg happens to be moving around the map, having to jump from one ledge to the ground. You know, you don't want to die just for, trying to keep up with the Zerg. So I definitely advise to run this. There are other traits in there that you can pick up if you don't. I just happen to prefer this one. Now the second trait is Dodge March, which is an amazing skill or an amazing trait in World v World because it reduces our ability um, to get snared, which is always good. Also tosses in a nice little regeneration. It has a short internal cooldown, which is also great. Now for the third trait that we're going to use is Last Stand, which is basically a traded balance stance. Now the reason you're going to run this is because your job is to be the first guy inside the counter Zerg. Now having last stand is almost mandatory, and that's because you're trying to get in and you're going to do a nice little stun and AoE knockback and all that other good stuff that I'll get into later. Um, but last stand is definitely mandatory for this build. It's also just great because if you're going to 1v1 somebody, having the ability to ignore the opponent's first stun is great. Now for the third trait that we're going to use is Leg Specialist. Now you have to run Leg Specialist to make this build work. Um, every single weapon that we have will snare your target, and without that, the build it's just not going to work out. So you're going to have to run Leg Specialist. The next trait that we're going to use is Shrug It Off. And it's another amazing trait, also pretty much mandatory. We are using a rune that also removes conditions. However, um, a lot of times when Shrug It Off hits, it will take off a condition that you wouldn't necessarily care stayed on you. Um, so you're going to use Fear Me, which allows you a little bit more control in which condition you want. The next setup is Warrior's Sprint, which is there solely to keep up with your Zerg. A lot of people run speed buffs as a passive stat, so having this just allows you the extra breathing room to actually stay in with your Zerg. Now the last trait that we're going to use is Mighty Defense. Now this one is also mandatory, and this is because we will be using a shield. With this you're going to be able to get 25 stacks of might pretty much on command. I'll get into more about that when I go over the weapons, but this particular trait you're going to have to run. It's 100% mandatory. Now the armor that you're going to use is the new Sentinel gear. The reason you're going to run this is because it has pretty much balanced stats, with Vitality being the highest stat. Um, and the reason you want to do that is because having a higher health pool, it's going to give you that extra buffer that you need to get inside a enemy Zerg. Um, Also for trinkets and accessories, I'm also running Sentinel gear. The back piece, however, is soldiers. Now, if you want a little more damage, you can take the accessories and switch them all into soldiers. However, I prefer having the 1.9 toughness. Now, the attack power, um, or the power overall, 2.8k. Once you're at full stack of might, which is 25 stacks, and of course another 25 stacks of bloodlust, which we use in the hammer, you're above 3,000. Um, Now you can tweak this to do more damage. If max damage, I believe, is 4.4k. Um, as you can see, we're not running any crit. We don't need to crit. We leave that for the rest of the Zerg. Our goal is to control the battlefield. And I'll get into how you do that with the weapons that we use. Again, with the weapons, hammer, you're going to use Bloodlust. Um, with the axe, you actually use a weapon swap rune, which is called Sigil of Battle. That's going to give you 3 stacks of might anytime you swap to that weapon. And you're going to be swapping in and out between your two-hander and your one-hander all the time. Um, as for the shield, what you're going to do is you're going to put a Sigil of Force that gives you a passive 5% damage, as long as you're, of course, using the axe and the shield. And that's just because you're using a one-hander, and I like to still see, decent numbers. So let's go ahead, let's get into the utility skills that we're going to run. Now, the utility skills that we run, we use Stomp. Stomp is our initiator. After we have our stacks of adrenaline, um, we're going to go ahead and use the Hammer Burst. That's to get inside the Zerg. Once you're inside, they're all stunned. You use Stomp. What Stomp is going to do is it's going to do a pretty decent amount of damage, but what it also does is it knocks back everybody. Now, those that are not getting uh, thrown out, we're going to pop Fear Me. That, of course, is just going to, pull off a fear. The runes that we use in our armor are actually soldiers, so that fear will also get rid of a condition if a condition is on you. We also run Endure Pain. That's another. Uh, I usually use that to get out of a Zerg if stuff's getting too heavy. Another good thing is if you're waiting for your Zerg to come in with water fields, um, so you can get healed back up, that gives you a little extra time to move around. So now let's get into the weapons. I'm just gonna scroll over the weapon skills as I talk about the weapon itself. Hammer is an amazing weapon. What you're gonna do is you're gonna use Hammer Burst. That's to get the nice AOE stun. It's a good setup. Hammer 3 is for your AoE snare. That's how you keep Zergs all tightened together. For the shield, you're going to be using Shield 5. That's where you get all of your stacks of might from. And with the axe, you're actually going to use Axe 3. And the reason you use Axe 3 is because it's the shortest cooldown um, for a snare. So if everything else is off cooldown, you'll have your Axe 3, and that'll keep your target down. Especially, it's good basically for 1v1 or if someone's trying to get away. There's a lot of combos that you can run um, with this whole setup. I'll let you guys figure out what combos work best for you. It does take a little bit of getting used to because you're constantly switching back and forth through one weapon set to the next weapon set. But once you guys get the hang of it, I think you guys will definitely enjoy being a basically World v World initiating tank. That's the build. If you guys have any questions, just message me, and I'll see you in game. Later.